Welcome to The Art of Growth, where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to help organizations and individuals transform. I'm Jim Zartman, and today Joel and I will be interviewing Suzanne in a way. We often say around here that the universal is looking for a particular. We need individual expressions or stories about things that are universal to all of us. We don't see ourselves as people who have arrived in any way, but we are in this work with you. We don't need perfect examples. We need living examples, people who embody the journey that we're on. And I think this story is a great expression of that. Before we get started, the hub of all of our work is theartofgrowth.org. You can go there to find out about your Enneagram type. You can also check out information about coaching and consulting for yourselves or for your organization. Today, I think that some of you will connect with Suzanne's story, and you may be in a similar place of being a mother and a professional and trying to navigate those waters of each. So if you're navigating that and want someone in your corner, reach out to Suzanne through our website and set up a coaching appointment with her. But for now, my friends, let's get into this week's episode. So today we're going to talk about a journey, and we're going to talk about one that is specific to you, Suzanne.
Yes.
But it is not by any means a stranger to a lot of people who come to the Enneagram and they get a glimpse of something, they start to discover something, and then the story starts to morph and change as they grow and they learn. And so we're going to dive into your story. But back us up to before we met you. What was going on, and how did you first kind of discover the Enneagram?
Well, I discovered the Enneagram through both of you, as a mutual friend introduced us based on our lines of work. And so I come from the corporate side, and I do a lot of work in change management and with teams. And what was missing for me was enabling individuals on the teams of being able to really come from a place of strength in who they were so that they could then come together as a team and really become high performing. And I was telling my friend, I do so much work with teams, but there's an element that's missing. And then therein lied the introduction to both of you. That's the story I'm able to point to, but there's so much more going on in my life about why you both showed up when you did.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that is beyond me. So I would say in my late 30s, I became confronted by my personality type but didn't know it. So all the things that had been working for me in my 20s and 30s to be super career-driven and to just approach life as I was, which was from a little bit of autopilot and a whole lot of instinct, I guess, and just not being as deliberate about it. I then went from, a single person with a very intense career to being married, to then having one kid, to continuing in that intense career, to then having another kid, and that second kid having some medical complexities. And I was confronting every part of my life as if it was the only part of my life and was maxing out. I couldn't be as career-driven as I was in my 20s with 2 kids and caring for someone with a chronic disease. Yeah. And I couldn't be an incredible mom that I wanted to be while also being in a high-powered career. And so there was so much that I kept coming face to face with. And as I learned about the Enneagram, I realized I was coming face to face with my personality type not at its best. Didn't have any of that language, didn't know how to explore it. I bought myself a life coach when I was 40. When she was amazing, and she focused on one area of my life where the Enneagram has helped me see that the 3 centers allows me to really look at my life through multiple ways. So that I believe that you both came into my life for my personal journey, even though it felt like it was for work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, we'll get to this more when we hit the professional being personal and how it's all, there are no compartments to our life. They really are all this integrated. But when you first came to the Enneagram, you identified as a 2.
Yes.
So how did that
kind of come about? What did you resonate with when you were starting to see that and identify with that?
Well, I think I did a very 3 thing when I identified with being a 2.
Oh, I like this.
You like this?
Well, let's hear this one.
Because I read the 2 and wanted to be a 2. So then I thought, I'll be the best 2 I can possibly be. I do. I love 2s. To all my 2s out there,
that.
come hang out with me. 2s are amazing. And I read that and was very much felt like I'm a 2. I'm a helper. I almost helped to a fault. You know, I have stories where I offered a chicken pot pie to a neighbor who had just had a baby or something. I can't remember the scenario. Somebody was sick maybe. And he said, oh, thanks, we're all set for tonight. And I said, no problem. I'll get one for you tomorrow night. And the comment was, boy, you're relentless. And I was like, whoa, I was helping. Okay, guess I'm super intense. So I saw helping in that. I saw just the whole connecting and really the heart-centered part of a 2.
Yeah.
I read it and was like, that's me. And really what I was saying is that's who I want to be.
Oh, I think so many people resonate with that.
Yeah.
You can see that in reflection.
Yeah.
When did you start to feel that internally? Like, it might be that I really want to be a 2.
I know. After I identified with a 3. So I'll tell you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was a while after. Okay,
It
gotcha.
was. Because I was like, why was I so clear that I was a 2 when I am so clearly a 3? I do. I think it was that the nature of the 3 is to really look external and set a goal and hit that goal. Like I was trying to hit the goal of being a 2. What really allowed me to get clear on my type was when we started doing the work on the instincts. Because part of what didn't resonate with me about a 3 is that oftentimes the general description of a 3 is written as if it's a social 3.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much about a social 3 that I was like, oh, that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm not the performer. I'm not the one on stage. I don't do this. I want to be the one behind the stage, putting the leader under the spotlight. And so I think I also ruled, as much as I ruled in being a 2, I ruled out being a 3 in my initial exploration of which type am I. So I felt more like a social 2 than I did a social 3, which is the kind of more general descriptions of each of those types.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until we started doing the instincts that I put away the type for a minute and I looked at only the 3 instincts. And Joel, I did this with you.
Yeah, I remember this.
Yeah. And you gave me the description of the 3 instincts and I color-coded which ones resonated with me, what statements resonated with me.
I love that you color-coded it.
Oh, yes. That's such a 3 thing to do, right? Like, yeah.
Oh, I don't
How could you
know.
not
It's
know
very
the 3?
organized.
Right. And so, like, the self-pres instinct was basically all colored in purple, which was my color of choice for agreed with. The social had half purple, and the one-to-one or sexual had none. Not none. It had a couple. But it was just so clear. Literally, it was in, I would say black and white, but it was in color, how clear it was that I was self-pres. So then the call to action was, well, am I a self-pres 2? And I went and read the self-pres 2 description. I was like, no, I'm not. I don't resonate with that at all. So then am I a social 2? But no, I'm very clearly self-pres first. So then I needed to hunt around and say, what am I? And I had some thought partners with me along the way, people who said, are you sure you're a 2? Mm-hmm. And so it opened up my willingness to consider something other than a 2, even though I had become kind of tied to it, thinking I was. And through learning more about a self-pres 3, because when I was identifying with a 2, there's a lot of perfectionist in me, and I just thought that was a strong one wing. Mm-hmm. But as I got to know the self-pres 3, there's a lot of perfectionism there.
Oh, yeah.
And that a lot more things clicked for me when I started looking through the descriptions and the implications and, you know, all of it related to a self-pres 3. And that moment was hard for me.
Why was that hard?
Well, shame. So welcome to the heart type.
Yeah.
I felt a lot of shame about having gone out there and been like, I'm a 2, you know, and let me talk from the space of a 2, and realizing I was wrong. And as a 3, that's super embarrassing. That's beyond embarrassing. That feels like failure. Because what I've learned in my definition of failure, it's not, you know, face down on the ground, completely devastated. Failure to me is not living up to my expectations. It's like getting to the second highest rung on the ladder is failure. I'm not at the bottom, but I'm not at the top. So there's a lot of work for me in that space that I've been exploring. And so having very publicly said I'm a 2 and then realizing I'm not, it was hard. I felt really bad.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of times we have to go back and ask all the questions again and check everything. And when there's some pain, when we experience pain, and that's when we go, well, all of these things that I'm understanding aren't quite working. Like, what did I miss? And you hit that point at the end of 2020. You can share a little bit about I have a couple weeks off here.
Gosh, yes. So the fall of 2020, we had so much work. The work had really come back. We had so much work,
corporate work,
that I couldn't see straight.
Yeah.
And I even said to my husband, I'll see you in December. And he was so amazing. But I said to myself, you will have 2 weeks off during Christmas break. Like, none of your clients want to talk to you then. Everyone, you're going to get to hang out with your kids. Just make it to Christmas. Yeah. So I did. We made it to Christmas. And Christmas is like a part-time job when you have kids because you got to get everything else in line. So it was the day after Christmas when I felt like I could really relax a little. And I was sitting playing Legos with my then 3-year-old, and I couldn't relax. I couldn't dial it down. I was like, I need to be productive. I need to get something done. I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting here playing Legos. I'm not doing anything. And I thought to myself, you have been waiting for these 2 weeks. And it was just so clear to me that it had nothing to do with the circumstance. And the intensity with which I was living was completely self-inflicted.
We have this conversation with people a lot when they're describing something they experienced. And I was like, is that a constant for you or is that a context thing for you? So is this just the context? Like, it's a busy season and that happens. And then what you realize is like, oh, this isn't a context thing. This isn't just because we were busy in the fall. This isn't just because we had all these clients. It's like, oh, this is this constant thing that's happening underneath. And I haven't named the constant.
Yes. And so productivity is a nice word for what I think I was what I know I was experiencing, which was workaholism. And I've done a lot of work in that space. There's 12-step programs for workaholism, which is very similar to other isms. And that's when I realized, okay, embrace this type, because doing the work of a 2 because I wanted to be a 2 wasn't going to get me where I needed to go. But embracing being a self-pres 3 opened up all of these avenues for me to do different work for myself, inner work.
So what did you start to do? Take us into a little bit of like, what did you start to do that started shifting the way you were experiencing your life?
Yeah. So the types of things I meditated on were very different. So I started meditating on things like, I have a problem with working too much. And really saying, and now that I've named it, I'm going to lift it up to somebody else to help me work through it. So, boy, I can't believe I'm talking about this. Whew, I'm going to have a vulnerability hangover tomorrow, but that's okay. So a lot of the meditating and things I was doing in that space, I recognized, remember that helping that I associated with as a 2? I realized that I do help a lot, but it's for the reasons of efficiency, not for connecting. And it was to solve someone else's problem. Like, oh, I have the answer to that. So I'm going to help you so that you don't have to struggle with whatever it took for me to get to that answer. Yeah. It wasn't, I'm going to help you so that we're connected and bonded. And so I realized, like, well, let me look at how I'm helping. And then I started letting go of needing to help in that way. Where if I hadn't had that insight, I wasn't moving the needle on helping when I was associating it with connection, because it just didn't resonate as much with my type. So I started just asking different questions about why am I doing certain things. And the other thing is I started putting on other people's lenses. Well, if I think this needs to be perfect, but someone else doesn't think this needs to be perfect, what do they see that I'm not seeing? And it started to really help me recognize that whatever I was thinking had to be a certain way, it actually didn't. And that's really helped with the perfectionist piece of it. Yeah. Because if it doesn't bother other people, why does it bother me? Yeah. Oh, look, it doesn't actually have to bother me anymore.
You bring up a really important point that is so crucial when people are trying to figure out their type and move through it, is that difference between the manifestation of the type and the motivation of the type. So someone might say, oh, you're such a helper. Like, oh, obviously you're 2. But you're like, but the helping, the motivation behind the helping was the efficiency. Yeah. The motivation behind it was the type 3. And so that's one of the things that is super important, I think, is not just seeing how we show up, but why.
Right.
And that's a harder level to get to. That's a harder layer for any of us to get to. Like, why am I doing this
Yes.
thing?
Yeah.
What is actually driving it? There was a point where you were presenting as tense. There was a lot of like disruption for sure going on in you. And there was then a softening and a relaxing that we witnessed in you. What helped you make a little bit of that transition?
What really shifted for me was when I started to see my inner response to things and realizing it doesn't have to be that way. There are moments when there's so much happening in any of our lives and in my life where I can't control it all in a way that my type would feel better about. Like, be as prepared, help the kids in all the ways that I think they need to be helped, do the work and everything. And there was a moment where it did become too much. And I had a choice. I could either keep doing what I was doing and be wound up, or I could let it go and say, I don't want to feel this way inside. And so I'm going to try a different way and see if everything is still okay. And so there was a lot of letting go. There was internal letting go. Nobody else would have noticed it. But a lot of internal letting go. It happened to be February, and in New England, it was super cold. We're still in the pandemic at the time. And because I was so stressed out, I was just in a really tough spot. I don't know if I could even say stressed out. I was just not where I wanted to be. And I used to have this belief that for me to do anything like meditating or running or whatever, it had to be 30 minutes or more, or it wasn't worth it. Well, I started to question that rule that I had, and I started taking life in 10-minute chunks. Super unlike me. Like, but if I had 10 minutes, I would do a quick 10-minute yoga thing, or I would do a quick 10-minute meditation or something. But narrowing my life down into 10-minute chunks felt much more doable. And then it started building, and I was making more time for myself. I was allowing myself to feel the way I wanted to feel, because that's the other thing I've learned about being a 3. I am so good at shoving the feelings off to the side, never to be brought again to the forefront to be dealt with. And I think they had sort of piled up quite a bit. And so 10 minutes at a time, I can do anything for 10 minutes at a time. So really checking in on my stories and my beliefs, and then doing things that are different. The doing is what really helped me break free in that case.
That's so, so good and so important. I hope people can take that, because that has helped me when you shared that, because it's like, oh, this is not like a large, I have to set aside a lot of time or a lot of energy. I don't have to like gear up for this. Like, I have 10 minutes. I can meditate for 10 minutes. I can breathe for 10 minutes. Like, using those little chunks between.
There's meaning to why I think that worked for you, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So Jim's question to you was, was over the movement that we saw and observed in you from that sort of darker place to a lighter place, that you talked about some of the habits that you began to change, and these habits were going against what your driven part of you, the driven part of your type, had been pushing for. I think you had mentioned something, and if I can vaguely remember, you had mentioned something about, I think I'm realizing that I had a lot of expectations on what others would, the sort of feedback I would get from the world around me for pushing so hard, for doing all this, and finally turning more to self-care and saying, I'm going to do these things. Does that ring a bell to you? Am I saying it the way?
Yes.
Okay.
And I remember standing in the kitchen with my husband. I said, something is not right. Like, I don't feel like myself right now. And he said to me, do you think you're depressed? And I thought, if there's even a chance that I'm depressed, it's time for me to focus on me. And I went the very next day down to my favorite cafe, ordered my favorite smoothie, and then sat in my car and did a meditation. You can picture it like surrounding me in the car. And I was doing this meditation, and she said something like, what do you need to let go of for whatever's next? And immediately the word sadness came up. And I don't think of myself as being sad, but I think it's because I never let myself deal with the emotions. I always park them. And as a heart type, I think that's what's funny about being a self-pres heart type. I don't know if there's any credence to this, but like, I think I have held myself back from allowing myself to really be a heart type because of the protection and safety that a self-pres wants.
Yes.
And so I never have allowed myself to really process emotions. And I think this was the time where I allowed myself to go there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And the best part was I didn't stay there just because I went there. Like I started moving through it.
You didn't get stuck?
I didn't get stuck.
Right.
And I
that's
think
the
I
fear,
had
right?
exactly. My fear had always been if I go there, I will
It's
never
the
come out
abyss.
of having dealt with these
abyss.
emotions.
Yeah.
And I just started giving myself permission to have them. Meant I didn't really need to resist them anymore. And then, as we know, they move through you faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do think had I not, that was a little bit earlier was when I was, really identifying with the 3, finding that I was a 3. It was in that moment of having a really hard time that the growth of the 3 were the tools that I needed to help me move forward. And had I not
Right.
really,
if you'd been using the tools for the 2.
Yeah. I think I would have had some improvement because any work you do is good work.
Yeah.
But the right work is what
Oh, yeah.
I moved through that so much faster than I ever would have had I tried to deal with it in other ways.
Sometimes I wonder if it's actually easier to start with the work of a different type to kind of get you in the rhythm of it.
Sure.
This happens, I think, for a lot of people. They identify with a different type and they start to do the work of that type. And it does help. There is a
without a
benefit to
doubt.
it. Totally. Like you said, all work is good work. And that kind of gets you warmed up because a lot of times for some people, and I've definitely heard this, seeing the real type, if I would have seen that first, I would have pulled back because it was
Yeah.
just too hard to see.
Yeah.
Like when I first came to the Enneagram, I did not see myself as an 8.
You just gave me chills because I had thought that I made the mistake of being a 2, but maybe that was my entry point. Maybe that was a gift.
I was going to say it is the same for me, and that I don't think I would have been able to. Not that I don't think, I know I couldn't see the 7 when I first came to it
Wow.
because it was too close to home. So I typed as an 8, and I believed I was an 8 for a year. In fact, I did a teaching on the Enneagram prior to being certified. I did a teaching on the Enneagram to a group of people, and I identified as an 8, and I told them all that. And then it took me a while to start peeling back the layers. And I did the work of an 8. I was following the instructions, the sort of, here's the tips on how to transform as an 8. And then it was, oh my gosh, when I reread it, and I had to reread it multiple times, but once I finally saw it, I could not unsee it. At that point, that's what I've been hiding from. It was too difficult for me. I think it would have been too difficult for my psyche to have seen it. It kind of blocked it purposefully. It was like, I wasn't aware of it, but I understand now why it was protecting me. Because if I'd seen it then, I don't think I could have handled it. So I think there's something to what's being said that it sounded similar to you, like you wanted to be a 2. To actually see what's really going on is really difficult for some.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to say to everybody. Like, look, if it takes you a while to type yourself, to get type, no shame to that. It's part of the process. And sometimes it takes a while to peel back some, the way you were raised, to culture, to just all sorts of factors that play a role in what makes it difficult sometimes to land your type.
Yeah.
Not including, obviously, the instinct for you made a
Yes.
massive difference.
Exactly. And I keep thinking, wow, I wish I had started with the instinct. But I do believe my journey was meant to be my journey. So I don't have regrets in that sense. I would say if someone is not seeing themselves in the types as they're typically described, maybe to pull back, put the type aside and look at the instincts. And then come back and look at the instinct of each type. So you're still only looking at 9 types, but now you're at the subtype level. So had I figured out I was a self-pres first, I could have looked at the self-pres 2, the self-pres 3, the self-pres 4, etc. It's still the same number of subtypes, but at the same time, I am glad to have had the journey. There were moments where I wasn't glad. I felt really annoyed that my path hadn't been linear, or ashamed that I had claimed to be a 2. I mean, you
Definitely
name it.
wasn't efficient, was it?
It was not efficient. darn it, is that it? Is that what the problem really is? Yeah. So,
Or there's a few things too. I mean, obviously there's the shame triggers, the wanting to, the image piece is important in that.
yeah.
But it also like forced you to grow around that issue,
Yeah.
which is, I think sometimes the journey, the whole, like the universe is wired for your growth.
Yeah.
Like maybe that is exactly the journey. Maybe you could not have had the breakthrough you've had this year
Yes.
had you started with it in a different way.
Yeah.
Without hitting that moment of pain. Because there's something about hitting moments of pain that pain precedes breakthrough.
Yeah.
There's something about that, okay, this is actually a hope for me. And I'm hold to this hope because I've seen it enough times in me and clients and whatever that, the pain you're feeling, that's preceding a breakthrough. When someone's like, man, my life is just crappy, poopy right now, it's like, how do you fertilize soil, manure? So when someone's like, my life is really crappy right now, I'm like, oh, good soil, good soil, good soil.
Yeah.
Something's going to grow. Something good's going to come out of this. Something beautiful is going to come as a result of this. There's something good on the horizon. And I think that's what we've witnessed in you. Like we've seen you experience yourself in a very different way lately. Even when stresses have come up, like your reactivity to that has been way down from a year ago.
Yeah.
The way you are actually experiencing functioning in your life, there's an ease to it that wasn't there before.
I agree.
There's a peace to it. There's a beauty to it. There is more of the being drawn,
Yeah.
And I think that there's an invitational aspect to where you are now that may not have been able to exist in any other way.
Yeah.
Like so often we wish things were different, because I think you mentioned talking to somebody in their 20s who's like knew the Enneagram. You're like, wouldn't it be, I wish I knew this in my 20s. And they're
Right.
like, yeah, but it's not sinking in for them yet in the way that it has for you because things emerge fully when they need to.
Right. Well, and that is something I am embracing because I wish I had it in my 20s for efficiency reasons. Seriously, like I wouldn't have had to go through the last 20 years. But it's not the right thing. I think for me, it just goes back to this idea that I have so much more inner peace than I had a year ago. But very little about my circumstances has changed.
Yeah.
I still work hard. I still am a mother of 2. I still have a child with a chronic disease, but I am so much more at peace and much more able to handle things. And when I can't, I can move through it more quickly. So the goal is not to never have it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is the hope and transformational work. Is the focus isn't the changing of the circumstance, which is what so many people do. It is important to change circumstances for sure. But,
Oh, yes.
But the process in which we go by it is oftentimes my problem is external, and so I'm going to fix my internal problem by changing the external circumstances.
Yes.
And when we don't know, which is most of my life, I've not known that I was doing that. It never works entirely.
Right.
And so now you're experiencing an internal change because you're actually going directly to the internal issue and dealing with that. And although externally things haven't changed circumstantially yet,
I don't know
that's
they
the
need
hope.
to. I don't know that they need to.
Yeah, in some situations, I do think are actually, they're there to grow us. Like they're not there to just pass, for us to transform or to get rid of them. They're there to actually work on us.
Yeah.
And they're good. And I think allowance is what we're, learning to do. Is just like, okay, this is spiritual work is allowance, is opening up our arms to what is this and what's it doing in me first, before we can even know, should this change? Should I be, doing something different? And like you said, I don't know right now. I don't know that anything needs to change right now. That's a wonderful place to be because that's the internal freedom versus like everybody's looking for external freedom. Like, I don't want this. I want to change that.
Story
This
of my
is
life.
right? Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting for me to also hear how you've experienced my growth. And what was amazing is you stuck with me a year and a half ago. You're like, okay, great. Yeah, let's work together. And then for you to see my growth, how you're experiencing it is there's a roller coaster for me too. Like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what it was like to deal with me.
It was an absolute nightmare, to
Well,
be
pretty
honest
much.
with you.
No, not at all. Yeah.
But then to hear how, for most people, they're not going to know the story about me, but they are going to experiencing me in a different way. And so it's interesting to think about the ripple effect of inner work.
Yes.
Totally. But the thing is, like, this sounds weird, but I never doubted you, because I knew that you were going through something, but I also knew like you were committed towards your journey. And so I didn't worry. I knew you would work it out. I knew that good things were going to come out of it. And I have trusted you since the moment I met you. I just knew like you're a trustworthy person. And so whatever ups and downs you experience have not really worried me that much, because I've just been like, it's going to be okay. There is so much goodness in you. I've never seen you resisting your growth. I've never seen you resisting the uncomfortability of that challenge that when it comes up to you, because I've just seen you want to be freer, be more fulfilled, be all those things. Like you have those desires. And so for me, I feel like it's been an honor to witness that. It's been an honor to watch you even struggle through it.
Yeah.
One of the things we say in group coaching, we want to treat your tears like fine china and your trauma like crystal. We want to honor that ground as you struggle through it.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with you too of my own struggles, and you walking with me in those, because that's the whole thing, is not that we are always the perfect person to experience, but there's that trust that we want good things. We trust that as we move through, as we move on, it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I think we've been able to partner with each other and with others across the country and now different parts of the world, because many of us are being drawn. So we've done this talk on drawn versus driven. Many of us feel like we're being drawn, and I think when we're drawn to something, there's something that's bringing us together in this journey. Like, oh yeah, I can feel that there's something pulling at me, calling me to the better version of who I am. And if we're all having that happen, then I think we can have grace for each other to journey through that together, where we're going to have valleys, we're going to have peaks, we're going to have it all. But I feel much more comfortable journeying with somebody who has that piece, something pulling, something drawing them to their higher self, rather than people that are just saying, nope, there's nothing more than this. This is it, and just sort of capping their own growth. So that's also part of what we've done, the three of us together, has been to just say, well, we're all being drawn, but we're also going to have moments where, we're going to struggle. And that's part of the path. That's part of the journey. And so grace to all of that.
Well, and that is my wish for everyone, is to have people that allow you to be on your journey, because they know that every step is a step forward. And even if there are a couple of steps that keep you still or take you back, it's not permanent. And so may we be those for others too, and really keep us all moving forward with grace and compassion.
Thank you so much for listening. If you leave us a review on iTunes, it helps people find the show. You can also follow us on Instagram at just Art of Growth. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, if you really connected to Suzanne's story, you can reach out to her. Maybe you're trying to navigate something on your own that it'd be helpful to do with a coach like Suzanne in your corner. So my friends, may you embrace the journey of being you and becoming you. May the authentic you where you are be present to where you are, but be in the dance of the being and the becoming. Be in the dance between the being and the becoming. Grace and growth, my friends.